Dear students, welcome to the revision lecture series, video number 2. In today's video, we are going to talk about chapter number 11, Goodbye Pasha Begum. Here I have decided to talk about the important points only. I did not read the entire text, obviously. But after listening to my lecture, if you find any question, any relevant question cropping up in your mind, please feel free to ask me that question. So without much ado, let us start our today's lecture. First of all, I would like to familiarize all of you about the main characters or the protagonists of this story. So I have omitted some characters from here because they are not that relevant, not that important. Just remember these few characters in this story. Now, first character is Bindi, and she is probably the most important character in this story. And she is a girl of about your age, that means about the age of 12 or 13, and obviously she is not much interested in history. We find another character, that is Malini, and Malini is Bindi's elder sister. The third character, the third important character is Baba. Baba is the father of Bindi and Malini. But on contrary to Bindi and Malini's interest, Baba is very much interested in history and visiting historical places. And in this story, we find Baba as an amateur historian who takes interest in history and visits a number of historical places. These three characters that I have just mentioned are from the present, but there are two more important characters from the past, from the Mughal era. They are Roshanara Begum and Jahanara Begum. Now, who are they? Roshanara Begum is the daughter of Shah Jahan, and in this story we find her as a very ill-tempered, bad-tempered woman. On the other hand, Jahanara Begum, who is the main character, the heroine of this story, is famously known as Pasha Begum, and she is a well-educated woman, a very well-mannered woman, and very forgiving in nature as well. Moving forward, let me talk about the main themes that this story talks about. The story begins with Bindi's exhaustion after getting overdosed on history. But then she time travels to the Mughal era, to the past, and there she gets the opportunity to interact with Jahanara Begum, that is Pasha Begum. And this interaction with Pasha Begum changed the entire course of Bindi's life. When she came to the present moment, when she came to the reality once again, she is not the same Bindi that she was before the time travel. Now she is getting much more interested in history. She is asking very relevant, pertinent questions relating to history to her father, who is an enthusiast about history. And this story broadly talks about how your experience, your good experience, can change your entire mindscape. So without much delay, let me describe some very important points before you. If you go through the first 2 pages of the story, you will find that Bindi is feeling very tired because for quite a few days, not just Bindi but their entire family is visiting different historical places in Delhi, like the Red Fort, Qutub Minar, and Humayun's tomb. Now her father, Bindi's father, is really interested to visit these places, but Bindi, Malini, they are too young to understand and enjoy these historical places. And that is why they are very much exhausted, very much tired of seeing all these historical places. So when she is feeling very exhausted during her visit in the Red Fort, she decided to rest for a few minutes. And she is thinking that why not we go for a shopping at Janpath? Why not we go to the Bengali market and eat some chaat? Why not we visit a shopping mall? What are we doing at these old historical places for so many days? And while she was thinking about all these things, she falls asleep inside the Rang Mahal of the Red Fort, and she time travels to the past and to the Mughal era. Now, for the first time, she experiences that the old cream-colored historical monuments is getting lively. She is experiencing the liveliness of these historical monuments for the first time, probably in her dream. But she is experiencing all these things firsthand. When she time travels to the past and to the Mughal era, Roshanara Begum considers her to be a slave girl. Obviously, it is a misunderstanding, but somehow Roshanara considers her to be a slave girl, and when Bindi protested, when Bindi asked her some questions, she felt insulted and decided to whip Bindi as a means of punishment. Now, while she is very much ready to whip Bindi, we find the entry of the heroine to the story, that is Pasha Begum. When Roshan is ready to whip Bindi, Pasha Begum comes to Bindi's rescue and stops Roshan. Here, one more thing you should notice is a comparison between the contrast between the characters of Roshanara and Jahanara. A very basic contrast that you can easily find out is that Roshanara is height-wise short. On the other hand, Jahanara is height-wise tall. When we find that Bindi is protesting, when Roshanara calls him a slave girl, it hurts her ego. And in order to showcase a sort of superiority over Bindi, a sort of authority over Bindi, she decides to punish her. She decides to whip her. So here we find a less forgiving nature of Roshanara. She is very angry, haughty in nature. And when Pasha Begum comes to rescue Bindi from the grip of Roshan, we find her complaining about Bindi that she is a very indisciplined girl. On the other hand, we find Jahanara, that is Pasha Begum, a more mature woman who showcases a generosity of spirit, who is very generous and forgiving. We find her very well educated in spite of being a counterpart of medieval society. She is a connoisseur of art and literature. She is interested in poetry, song. She is interested in Sufism, the philosophy of Sufism. And she is writing a book on the Sufis of Hindustan. So in this manner, we find Jahanara a much more broad-spirited woman, much more mature woman than Roshanara. Let us move to the next slide. Here, we talk about Bindi's interaction with Pasha Begum and what did she learn from Pasha Begum. Now, first of all, Pasha Begum gave Bindi a home tour. She took Bindi to her room. She showed the books that she had, the decoration, the art pieces that showcases Pasha's love for education, that showcases Pasha Begum's interest in the field of art and craft, that showcases Pasha Begum's love for literature, that showcases Pasha Begum's interest in Sufi philosophy. And these things are really important because if you know the history of Middle Ages, then you know that the women belonging from the Middle Ages were not allowed to do a lot of things. They were not that independent. They did not have access to proper education. Most of them are not allowed to pursue art, craft, literature, especially philosophy. But in spite of belonging from the Middle Ages, she educated herself. She is very broad-minded. She took interest in songs, art, craft, philosophy, poetry. Okay, these things showcases her personality. Her character is not only mature and broad-spirited, but also very inspiring to all of us. Because she is not only made herself educated, she is writing a book on Sufi saints. Her inspiration is Khaja Nijamuddin Auliya, who is a very famous Sufi saint. Right. Now, at the end of their interaction, we find Pasha Begum's love for perfumes. She talks about her personal favorite, that is a combination of jasmine, sandalwood, and rose attar. And obviously, she showcases her leadership qualities. Always keep this thing in mind that a leader should motivate, should have the capability to understand your mind, your feelings. And Pasha Begum does exactly so in this story. While Roshan was ready to beat Bindi with a whip, Pasha came into the scene and rescued her. Instead of beating her, instead of accusing her, instead of shouting at her, what did she do? She tried to understand Bindi's perspective. She tried to understand the point of views that Bindi adds to the scene. And slowly, a very fruitful interaction takes place between both of them. But just think of a situation where Bindi was getting to be whipped by Roshan and Pasha Begum joined in with Roshan and both of them beat Bindi badly. What would have happened? Bindi would never have got interested in history ever. She doesn't have any interest in history, and if this thing would have happened, then she would have hated history throughout her life. But the interaction with Pasha Begum changed her lifescape. Now let us talk about the impact of this interaction on Bindi. The first thing that happened is Bindi got interested in history. And she started asking very relevant questions about history. We find that she is asking her father very, very relevant question that showcases her interest in history. So this is the leadership quality. So Pasha Begum must have motivated her to take interest in history. Otherwise, Bindi would never have been so interested in history. And here lies the significance of the nomenclature of this story. And that is why probably the title has been given after the name of Pasha Begum. I thank you all for listening to my short lecture. Always remember that history is very important for any civilization. And I'd like to end my today's lecture with a quote that is, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin and culture is like a tree without roots. So history is very important. All of you should strive to know the history and culture of your land. I thank you all again, once again. If you need a detailed lecture on this text, please let me know. I am always eager, I am always ready to record a detailed lecture explaining uh, each line of the story. And if you have any further question, please feel free and comment down below. Thank you.